Hey leader, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Baritone Advisors. We also recorded this episode live from the new Return.com studio. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. Know that you can also watch all of our episodes over on our YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed there as well. And as always, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and it's made a difference in your life, it would mean the world to me if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. That really does help us to grow our listenership and to reach more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. Well, leader, in today's episode, you're going to hear my conversation with the one and only Reid Carpenter. Reid is a Pittsburgh legend. He is the founder of the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation. He is currently 85 years old and still making an incredible impact. And he has made a huge impact on my life personally through his leadership and through his vision. And in our conversation, you're going to hear Reid share many things. You're going to hear him talk about how to make it to your finish line. You'll hear him share the story of getting a vision to make Pittsburgh famous for God. You'll hear him talk about the importance of gathering people, the importance of suffering in our lives and the role that it plays, and what he's learned about fundraising and so much more. If you've never heard Reid, you are in for a treat. Get ready. If you know Reid, this is so good. You're going to get so much out of this, and I think it'll add massive value to your life. But before we dive into the interview, just a few announcements. This episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Baritone Advisors. The financial advisors at Baritone Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Baritone Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at baritoneadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Baritone Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. And my wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers and had an incredible experience. And not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, for every couple that comes in engaged, they give them a book to help them prepare for marriage. And we just love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And I also want to thank our new sponsor, Return.com. And leader, let me just ask you this. Have you ever had an interest in investing in real estate? Well, now for as little as $500, you can become a commercial real estate investor. Just visit Return.com to learn more. That's REITURN.com. Investing involves risk. Please consult the Return Offering Circular if you're interested in investing. And with all that being said, let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with the one, the only, Reid Carpenter. Well, everyone, you are in for a treat today. We are with a living legend, Reid Carpenter, and I was just telling Reid, I can't believe we're almost 400 episodes in and I haven't had him on. I'm going to have Reid share his story, but the impact that this man has made in Pittsburgh, in our nation, in our world, and for the kingdom really can't even be put into words. It's just been incredible, and we're just so honored, Reid, that you would take time out of your day to invest in me and invest in all the leaders that will listen to this. So welcome to the L3 Leadership Podcast.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks to be with you.
Yeah, well, what I'd love to start with, for people that don't have context, in Pittsburgh, you're famous for the story up on Mount Washington that really changed your life. And I would love to start with that. Can you share the story about you joining Sam Shoemaker and others on top of Mount Washington that transformed your life forever?
Yes, that was, I just had gotten to Pittsburgh, Doug, in 1962, 61, 62. And I didn't know anybody. I was there to do young life work. And the first person I met of outside my little young life group was a guy by the name of Don James. And Don was an Episcopal priest. And we hit it off right away. Don was a rough stone. He'd come through the Korean War. If he couldn't eat it, drink it, or sleep with it, he wasn't very interested in it. And so he got converted through his relationship with Sam. And I won't go into those details, but the fact is that one day Don called me and said, I'm going to pick you up, and I'd like you to meet someone. And off we went to Mount Washington. I had no clue. and I was 21. Very young and really had no clue what was going on. And so it was up there that the Holy Spirit just absolutely captured my soul and my mind and my heart. I came to Pittsburgh to do Young Life. And so I never had a vision for Pittsburgh. I had a vision for kids, but not for Pittsburgh. And so when we got up there, without going into massive drama or detail, the fact is that Sam, we were on that concrete pad that's sitting in front of St. Mary's Church, and so the words out of Sam's mouth eventually were, "I have a vision that Pittsburgh will one day become as famous for God as for steel." And of course, the smokestacks are bustling, and the barges are going up and down the river and so forth. And it was a very pregnant notion to me, but I didn't have any context for it until he said, after he had uttered those words, "Turn around and behold your city." And even when I say those words, I am literally got goosebumps. And I turned around and I saw Pittsburgh for the first time. And because what I saw, Doug, was I'm going to try to describe this in some detail because it's the essence of what changed my life. What I saw when I turned around was I saw domains. I saw the power of the city. I saw the sports world. I saw the university world. I saw the hospital world. I saw the working world. I saw it all sprawled out before me, and I was overwhelmed. I mean, wasn't looking for it. I didn't know what was going on. But it was very, very clear. Third largest corporate city in America. I mean, I saw from that little place, I beheld my city. And but in addition to that, Doug, I was really given insight that still I think is pretty unique and hasn't really been fully understood or captured. That I understood in that moment that God had a plan that he'd already put into place. And that in each one of those domains, which I was feasting on, he already had an army of people that he had prepared to go into those domains on a daily basis.
Wow.
And that we didn't need to do anything except pray for and inspire those people who are already assigned to represent Jesus in those places. And they were already there.
Wow.
And it really freaked me out. And so that's, in addition to that, I heard, I'm not sure it was the first time I was up there, or because I went up there many, 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 many times and was spoken to in a variety of ways when I was there. But at one point, I saw clearly that Jesus was saying to Pittsburgh that I have a city prepared, already prepared. Revelation 21, and behold, I saw a new Pittsburgh coming down from heaven. And it was as clear as a bell to me that this was not something that was of human concoction, but this was, for whatever reason, this was God's design, and that Pittsburgh was going to be known not only for God, but for the essence of his kingdom.
And so you got this vision, which I love. And if my memory serves correct me if I'm wrong, within 4 years, the 3 or 4 leaders that you were with on that platform, including Sam, actually passed away, correct?
1965. And then Don James passed away in 1967.
Hmm.
So it kind of left me, hovering in midair, trying to figure out what we were going to do with this vision. And but I might tell you that we were really flabbergasted. We were down on our knees. I mean, we knew that we'd been confronted by God Himself. And so Don and I he was an ex-Marine, man. As I said, he was a rough stone. And so we'd never prayed together in our lives. And so we decided we better go spend 3 days and pray together and figure this out. What the heck was this? And it was then that Don asked me if I would commit the rest of my life to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
And 21 years old, commit the rest of my life to Pittsburgh. And I wasn't even married then. I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. But then, he immediately said that not only should we commit our lives to Pittsburgh, and then he said, "Are you willing to commit your life to me? Because we might be the only ones here."
Wow.
This is a forever commitment. Okay. And again, I said yes because I didn't know any better. I didn't know, it wasn't a thoughtful response, but it was an instinctive spiritual response. And so I could go on, but that's the essence of what happened.
Yeah. And so you have this vision from God, behold your city, you see it in an entirely new light. And eventually, and you don't have to go through the details of how you got there necessarily, but eventually that led you to starting the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation. I guess I'm just curious, can you talk to people who may feel like they have a vision from God, but don't necessarily, like you say, have any clue of what they're supposed to do with it? How did you process and ultimately get to the place where you felt like the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation was something you were supposed to birth?
Well, of course, I never even dreamed. I didn't know what a Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation was. Don't forget that almost 20 years went by before PLF was established.
Wow. So what did you do in those 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing Young Life work for all those years, but by God's Spirit, I was led. I mean, if you were around then, Doug, you would have been at the heart of this. Because I was looking for brothers and sisters who would meet with me so that we could pray together over whatever this vision was. We had, as you put it, we had the billboard, Pittsburgh, famous for God, as for steel. That has never left. I just had a long conversation with Bishop Zubik, and that's what we're after.
Yeah.
And right here on my wall, I had the privilege of getting an award from the Pope, and
wow.
it's an award called Manifesting the Kingdom Award. Okay, so the desire of my heart was always to manifest the kingdom of God and to get people excited about Jesus. I mean, those are my two trump cards. And so, yeah. So that took, we gathered. You asked me in one of your questions, when you have a vision like this, and you don't know much about it, but you also love Jesus, and you're meeting the Doug Smiths of this world, you're going to bring them together. You're going to spew this vision upon others, and you are going to basically take it seriously. I mean, we had a band of brothers that were willing to die for this vision, literally. And I mean, John Guest was in that, that circle. And I mean, I won't go with the names, but eventually it was called the Pittsburgh Offensive. The Pittsburgh Offensive met every month for a day. In the early stages, we met overnight up at Dora Hillman's house. And we'd weep, we'd cry, we'd laugh, we'd fart. I mean, we'd be together, man, like a bunch of soldiers.
And as you guys gathered, I think this is so beautiful because eventually you started the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation, and you may know the number off the top of your head. I don't, but through just simply gathering people, praying, I think you eventually prayed, Jesus, what are you weeping about of our city? Through your efforts in those gatherings, how many is it now? I feel like 70 plus nonprofits, churches, et cetera, have been formed to do something about an issue that was happening in the city of Pittsburgh. Can you talk just more about that and how that came to be?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had the wisdom and the insight to basically know that we weren't there to discuss theology. We weren't there to discuss doctrine. We weren't there to discuss things that would divide us. We were there to talk about and pray about things that were on the heart of God that He already had revealed. We didn't have to go very far to find out whether He wanted to feed the poor. We didn't have to go very far to find out whether He wanted kids out of jail. We didn't want to, there's certain things that are self-obvious. And so those things we began to pray about. And of course, the earliest thing we took on in this spirit of what should we be doing together that we cannot do if we remain separated. We took on substance abuse. Okay. That was killing us. That was killing our city. That was killing kids. And we didn't even have a treatment bed in Pittsburgh to care for those kids. And so some of those issues became very, very self-evident, and I'll just name a few because you asked. We took on health care for the poor. East Liberty Family Health Care Center came from that. We took on housing for the poor. Hill District Ministries and Garfield Jubilee and all these things came from that. We took on hardcore pornography, and we took on, the whole sex industry. We took on big things that, we couldn't, no one could do by themselves.
And I am curious on how this happened. So I want you to talk about empowering leaders, because I think a lot of times people may see a need like that and think, well, there's already someone meeting that need, or how am I supposed to be a part of it? When you guys would pray about that, it wasn't you that started all of those things. You would pray. Would it be that God would just deal with someone in prayer in those meetings of, hey, Doug, you're supposed to go start this with substance abuse? Or would it be people saying, hey, I see that need, I feel passionate about it, I want to do it, and then you guys would come around and resource them? I'm just curious, how did those kind of things just launch out of need?
I think this is where I was given unique skills. I mean, I had the kind of personality, humor, didn't take myself that seriously, but I was absolutely called to this. So when I spoke, I wasn't trying, but when I spoke, people got it. And then people wanted to go. I mean, they wanted to hit the ball. And the reason we started the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation was the fact that we needed, if you were going to, let's just say, you set a table and you invited some people to that table because you decided on substance. Most Christians didn't know anything about substance abuse. It just so happened that Sam had created AA. It was part of that. And so we had a group of people that understood recovery. But from the systemic issue of what are we going to do about this? Okay, how are we going to take it on? We realized that we in the Christian community, we didn't have any knowledge of this stuff. So we started inviting, the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health, and we started inviting, the institutions that really, really had energy around this, and we invite them to the table. Okay. Then my great gift and skill was saying, look, if we all agree on something, we're going to stay here long enough and pray long enough that if we agree on it, I'll find the money. I'll somehow if the God wants us to do it, the money's there. And we'll just go after it.
So I want to follow up on that thought. Before I do, I just want to encourage listeners. So this is the L3 Leadership Podcast. Obviously, we've done a lot with L3. I remember when I first got around, I went through a collaborative experience through the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation, probably in 2011 and 12. And really, it was the first time I had heard Reid share his story that he just shared with you about his time on Mount Washington and getting this vision for God being more famous than steel in Pittsburgh and looking at every single industry. And I got so fired up. I mean, I don't know how my heart just exploded for that vision. And I didn't know what to do, similar to what Reid's saying. And fortunately, I called Reid and he gave me an hour and a half of his time. And I'll never forget, my biggest takeaway from that. I said, Reid, I want to do for my generation what you did for yours. And you just simply said, just start gathering people and see what the Holy Spirit says. And, I was waiting for, hey, what's the game plan? Give me the specifics. But no, it was just get people in a room and see what God does. And we've been doing that now for 10 years. And I'm just amazed at what God has done. And so I don't know if there's anything else you want to say there, Reid, but I just really wanted to encourage listeners. Man, if you get excited about a vision, just start gathering people around it. And, some people will come and not be interested, but some people will come and be called to what you see and be a part of it. And so that was just so life-changing for me when you told me that. Is there anything else you would say when it comes to gathering people consistently?
I think yes, Doug, as I was prayerfully preparing for this, I recognize the fact that without vision, people die. There is no work without vision. And that's something that you as a visionary need to really keep looking at, okay? Wow. Because a vision needs to be bigger than all of the sum of its parts. You cannot provide good leadership that you have in your circle with vision that is small, vision that will not require from them leadership. Okay. Wow. And when you talk about a city, when you talk about, this is where I've spent 60 years, so I know a little something about what it means to take on a city. Okay. Because we've got leadership foundations all over the world now that basically understand what God's purpose for cities are. We're going to end up in a city. I hope it comes really soon. But I think, Doug, this business of articulating and having in your not in your head. It can't be something that you devise. It's got to be something that's imparted. That's why prayer and clear humility. I've been truly gifted with a humble spirit. I don't want the credit for anything. Don James taught me that lesson more than I can. Young Life was running out of money. And he was concerned about me, and he looked in his bank account at the Pittsburgh Experiment and said, we got $21,000 in our bank account. Why don't you take it?
Wow.
That I'll never forget that as long as I live, obviously. So this business about who cares who gets the credit, as long as you're pursuing the vision that God has provided for you. Our problem in this space is the fact that we belong to so many organizations that we think are pursuing a vision, but they end up being competitive. They end up being people who slice each other up because they need the resources that are implicit in the vision. That vision's got to be transcended. It's got to transcend all that crap.
That's so good. And I guess as I've listened to you over the years, I wanted to ask you this because it relates. You talked about it's so easy as we start to grow as leaders, we become, leaders in our organizations, and that becomes the focus. And it's so easy, like you were saying, just to focus on our little organization, not really focus on kingdom. And you've consistently, every time I've been around you in the last decade, have challenged us every time we get together, go visit each other, be friends with each other. Friendship. And that seems so simple. I just want to hear you talk about friendship, and I want to hear you challenge leaders to get outside of their organizations and visit others and just talk about that. I don't really have a specific question about that, but I know you have lots of vision around it.
I was anticipating that question because it's a darn good question. Okay. Friendships, relationships, friendships it's the strategy of the creator. It's the engine of creativity. It is what brings us together. It's what creates new people. It's the essence of our sexuality. It is God's design for recreation is relationships. And the fact of the matter is, when I saw what I saw of a multitude of people going into those various and sundry domains to represent the king, okay, I realized that my fundamental job was doing what I'm doing now. Go, Doug. Go, Doug.
Wow.
Go, baby. You got gifts that I will never have, and I'm going to cheerlead your gifts right to the finish line because your gifts are required to create the kingdom of God, okay? And I even cheerlead people who don't know Jesus, okay? Because they also were created by God. They just don't know it.
Wow.
Their gifts have been created by God. They were created by God. So, I can walk into any domain as long as the people doing this are doing good, not evil. We've got to be discerning of what evil is and not promote it. But we also have to be discerning as to what good is. So, it's an amazing thing to be broken free from institutional design to look at a bigger picture that you can cheerlead everybody and anybody who's doing their best to achieve goodness. And I think that that is a fountainhead of love, of not having love be created on the basis of some smaller agenda or some criteria, okay? Because people were created to love.
I thought that's interesting because that's always stood out. I believe at some point you, through the PLF, created a fund to basically fund initiatives of people that were doing well or doing something that Jesus was weeping about. And if I remember correctly, you would actually fund like non-faith-based organizations if they were doing good. Is that accurate? And I'm just curious, what was that like? Because I think a lot of people would be like, why would you fund something that's not in line with your values? Can you talk more about that?
Well, sure. I mean, the fact is that, take Pittsburgh right now. One of the biggest crises in Pittsburgh is hunger, and that people are hungry and children are hungry. And so how much of Jesus do you need to know in order to feed the hungry? I mean, you just want good people willing to roll up their sleeves, as it's going on right now as we speak. Amen to action. Going to create 1 million meals.
Wow.
And the fact is that you don't have to sign up as a Christian to get in on to get on putting rice in a bag. And now I'm hoping that Christians obviously are the front and center of that enterprise, but it's not necessary.
Yeah. You mentioned fundraising. So going back to a little bit to people getting a vision for something and wanting to go do it, I think that's something that always intimidates people. And I know part of it is gifting, but I've been in fundraising for 13 years. I'm just curious, when it comes to raising money for initiatives, you said if God gives you a vision for something, he'll fund it. What have you learned about raising money and capital to do what God's called you to do or others to do?
Well, clearly, the biggest thing I've learned is that it's based on the integrity of your relationships.
Hmm.
And the more trust that people have in you as a person, not your cause, but you as a person, Doug Smith, the more apt you are going to be a very decent fundraiser. Okay. Because they trust your word. They like the sparks that fly when they see the good work that you do. And if you persist in loving them, even if they don't give, if they become your friend, okay? Now, in my case, Doug, I attribute, I've raised billions of dollars in my lifetime, okay? And the majority of that money has come from widows.
Hmm.
Widows are the most powerful financial instruments of God
Wow.
because they understand, okay? They understand, for one thing, they're lonely. For one thing, they're looking for purpose.
Hmm.
For one thing, they're, in my case, they're all women. And in my case, I've always had to be very, 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 very careful on that basis. But nonetheless, when you started getting handed checks by $1 million checks from names of people that you'd recognize, uh, it's really based on their own spiritual development, their own hunger. In one case, one of these women had a child that was born with great disabled body, and so I found out that this was her passion, and she didn't know what to do with her passion because her passion had to do with her own daughter.
Hmm.
And so when I made that discovery, which is what is the essence of fundraising, if you're always going to go after money for the things that you want or that you think, as opposed to what is in the heart of the person with the money, if you don't have an instrument that's large enough to incorporate the vision that they have for their money, you're in a very limited space. That's why this idea of a vision big enough
Hmm.
to incorporate the gifts and the resources of other people, the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation always received resources that were of that nature. Yes, we raised money for the things that we thought God wanted us to do. But when we found out what was on the heart of the people who had the money, and we loved them into believing that we were there to help them.
Wow.
You're not helping us. Are you kidding me? We're helping you.
Wow. Anything else on fundraising?
Well, I do believe that this is the most difficult area for most people. Okay, they stumble over it. They've been massively hurt along the way by people who promised and didn't come through. I mean, or they got massively hung up by their own inadequacies or their own. In my case, I had dreams for people that they didn't have for themselves.
Wow.
you know, and so I always lived, kind of on the edge of, I was expecting something that didn't happen. And in fact, I would announce it. And, and so I spent a little time in trouble, and, uh, And so my expectations were always a little bit larger because the needs that I perceived were always pretty overwhelming. You see kids die from overdoses, or whatever issue that you've taken on, for instance, the biggest dollars that we received in the context of adolescent drug abuse. I won't mention names, but you get to know the president of Westinghouse. Became my great friend. I found out a kid dying of alcoholism. And I found out that he himself had a problem with alcoholism. So it's in the family. And so that's the easiest money to raise, is that when you connect, power, my theory of this, Doug, for your audience, it's not a bad theory, is that when I was in young life, I understood if I had wanted to get into a high school and I had to get the superintendent's permission, okay?
Yeah.
I had the idea, but I didn't have the power and the authority to execute the plan. So instead of me trying to do that, I'd call Fred Federoff from Alcoa and I'd say, hey, Fred, would you mind calling the superintendent of schools and tell him you want to introduce me? And guess what? He'd have a lunch with me the next day. So to know how to take power, authority, and ideas and combine them was a very meaningful formula.
I may be oversimplifying this, but again, one thing I admire about you is you have been able to build a trust, influence, and relationships with people in power that a lot of people would be intimidated by. You mentioned CEO of Westinghouse, Fred Federoff. You can go on and on. I know you led Bible studies with people like that. Maybe oversimplifying to say they're just people, but do you have any advice for building relationships with people in positions of power, not for your gain, but truly just to build relationship with them?
Absolutely. I mean, they were my favorite people. I'm a human being. So the fact is that for me to say that a relationship with Fred Federoff was the same as my relationship with a bus driver, okay, it just isn't true. It just is not true. My relationship with the bus driver might be far more kingdom, that might be far more important, okay, to Jesus than my relationship with a Fred Federoff.
Wow.
But from the standpoint of how I dealt with it, and this might be sin, it might be, it might be plain old sin.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I always understood that the relationship was not about me. This was about this vision, this kingdom. I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, this is what we're going for. I'm still going for it, man.
Come on.
I'm still raising a bunch of money. We're not there yet.
How old are you now?
85.
Let's go. Talking about relationships, in the NFL and in the sports world, they talk about coaching trees and, who came from these. And, I think in the kingdom, we talk a lot about discipleship trees. When I look at your discipleship tree, I'm amazed at all the disciples that you've raised up that not only just went out and did great things, but also raised up a whole nother generation of disciples under them. Any advice on really making disciples, not just friendships that people that you mentor once in a while, but I'm talking people that you significantly impact that go on and take your legacy and bring it to the next generation?
That's a tough one for me, Doug. I think discipleship is more caught than taught. I think it's something that you got to look behind you. And if you say you're a leader, you got to look behind you and see if anybody's following you. You can't be a self-professed leader.
Hmm.
Leadership has to be endowed. It has to be provided. It has to be given by those who give it. And then you've got to have the integrity to play that part that you have in moving that person to the next phase of their development. I've never been a great teacher, Doug. You're a great teacher. I mean, I just know that by this interview. I mean, you're taking notes. You're putting things in place so that you can not only explain them to others. That's the reason you do this blog, is the fact that you are after something that you have clearly defined, and that once you have it, you are able to not only define it, but you're able to provide the kind of resources that people need in order to take their next step. That's never been me. I've never been didactic. I've never done that. Okay. And by God's grace, I haven't had to, because the Lord has provided me a platform where that's caught by other people rather than me having to teach it. Now, don't get me wrong. I've taught leadership and in young life. I mean, my gosh. But you know what I'm talking about. You know, it's never been my trump card.
Yeah. You're 85 years old and still going strong, still got a lot to do, as you were just saying, getting fired up. I had a leader tell me once that he believes that only about 2% of Christian leaders make it to their finish line intact, doing what God's called them to do. I don't know if you would agree with that statement or not, but I am curious. When I meet leaders who are in their 80s, still doing great things for God, decade after decade after decade, I would love to hear you talk about longevity in ministry and how to get to your finish line.
It's a fairly contemporary question for me. You know, I get up every morning. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go anywhere. I mean, the deeper I get into the notion that I am here only to exemplify and to work on God's will for my life. That's it. There's no other reason for me to hang around. Okay. I would rather be with Jesus than to just be talking about him down here, right? But you know, everyone has to work that out. But the deeper I go, Doug, the deeper I go, because I have a chance to go pretty deep. I spend a lot of time in prayer and a lot of time in mass and taking the sacraments, and I'm in that phase of my life where I'm prepared. And here's what I would say to your generation: whatever you do, take care of your soul. It's the only thing that's going to last.
Wow.
Your body's not going to last. Your mind's not going to last. There's nothing about you that's going to last except for your soul. And so soul keeping is really one of the most important things we can do. So I spend most of my time finding Doug Smiths to breathe into them hope, love, and life. That's the greatest gift I can give to you, is making sure you know how much you're loved and how important you are in the scheme of creation, and that the platform that you have is not something that you've achieved. It's something that you've been given.
Wow.
And what is that? It's your soul. It's your soul. I have a view of heaven that is very exciting. You know, I believe we're going to be in on the reconstruction, the new earth, the new heaven, the new earth. That the skills that you're developing in front of that microphone and in the other demonstrations of your life are going to be fully maximized in the kingdom of God. And so, we're going to build new cities. We're going to have so much fun. It's going to be incredible. And so I just think this is practice. This is practice. And so nurturing that part of you that's going to last is probably, and that's what happens at my age. You're working 24 hours a day. I know. I know. You don't have that much time set aside to nourish your soul, to go on retreat, to be with people who are going deep. You do that in your quiet time. You do that as you can. But the older you get, the more time you have, thank God. And it's a beautiful privilege. So the resiliency of people lasting, okay, is really depending on how they take care of their soul.
Wow.
My soul is more resilient right now, Doug, than it's ever been. I feel it. I'm in it. I'm of it. And the Holy Spirit is just laughing his head off because I'm pathetic.
We've talked a lot about vision, and you've done a lot of great things in your life, but your life hasn't been perfect. It hasn't always been easy. I know you've gone through a lot of suffering as well. I'm always interested to hear how leaders deal with seasons of suffering, the pain and the pressure of leadership. What have you learned about suffering over the course of your life in leadership?
Well, my greatest suffering was the 10 years my wife and I were separated. And that was a long journey in the night of the soul. I had to keep functioning, but every light in my soul was out. And it's not something I desired. It's something I contributed to, but it was not something of my desire. And so right here in my hand is called Psalms Now. It's it like we all have. This is the fortress of I met Corey Ten Boom in Dora Hillman's living room.
Wow.
And I was going through this dark night of my soul, and Dora said to her, he's going through some deep stuff, right? Well, compared to what? And so when you talk about suffering, it's compared to what? Take a look at what's going on in all kinds of places in the world. But it's my suffering. And you asked me about my suffering. She sent me a note. I was on my way out, and she put a note in my hand. Here's what the note said. Remember, when you're under the wing, when you're under his wings, the lights are out. You can't see. And boy, oh boy, was that ever true. And so I would say that to the degree that you suffer and the lights are out, there's a deeper work going on in Catholic theology or Catholic thought. You release that suffering. You release your suffering to other people who are suffering. So when I was in my darkest nights, I would release my own pain, and sometimes I couldn't even breathe. I'd release that to people who were also suffering.
Wow. And
I found great redemptive, because once the light is back on, right, you realize that you've changed. You realize that the whole equation, you find new metaphors, And so, those were some of the most, I read this every day,
Wow.
pick it up and say, here's where I was on, in 1975, I was in a KOA with my 4 children in the back of a truck, and I was by myself, and I was weeping and wailing in the middle of the night, brokenhearted. I've got all that recorded, so I can go back and now say, these are the ingredients that have made me the man that I am. And I think all suffering, my physical suffering as of late is in no comparison, none, zero comparison to that soul suffering that I experienced.
Wow. So much there. I guess, someone asked me the other day, Doug, what has caused you to grow the most? And I think they wanted me to say, a podcast, a conference, or, some leader. But the reality is, as I look back on my life, unfortunately, it's been suffering, right? And you said becoming a new person on the other side. If you could go back to the beginning of your journey, is there anything that you would change? Do you have any regrets? I'm just curious.
No. 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 Not one thing. I mean, it's all folded into a narrative that has placed me in the most unbelievably blessed place. Listen to us talk. How many people 85 years old are getting a chance to reflect on the questions that you're asking?
Wow.
Name them.
Yeah, you're blessed. I did want to ask, this is a totally random question. You mentioned, you're a Catholic, but you converted to Catholicism usually. And again, this is, I guess, anyway, so it seems like historically in the last 30 years, more people have converted from Catholicism to evangelical Christianity than the reverse. I believe you were evangelical background. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe a Catholic bishop came to you and said, Reid, give me 7 dinners and I'll convert you to Catholicism. And if that's true, one, I would love for you to talk about your conversion, but and what was said in those 7 dinners, if that's really what went down.
That's not quite the spirit of what went down. It was me searching and going to him and say, I think I'm pregnant. I'm ready to give birth to something here. And I would like you to walk through my pregnancy with me. Okay. And see if I got a baby or whether I got nothing. Okay. That was the spirit of it. So I would come in each of those dinners with a list of questions. Wow. that were permeating, like where do you come off believing that the bread and wine actually become the real body and blood of Christ? I mean, where's that from? And so I would ponder those questions that were very, very, very meaningful to me in terms of my questions about where I was entering. But the real drive for me to go in that, again, in the spirit of the questions you're asking me, I led, by God's grace, a whole lot of people to Jesus in high school. And a lot of them became pastors, and a lot of them became, some of them. And I watched with horror what happened to so many of them that would break off and split, just, it broke my heart, because my vision for the kingdom required us to be of one heart and one mind, not to be broken into pieces. Okay. And so I think the best way to look at my yearning, and this is very private and very, I'm not promoting it, I'm just saying, This is what happened. I began to yearn for the sacraments. I wanted to know Jesus in a way that wasn't I couldn't figure out. It was mystery. substantive mystery that I had to release myself. And every morning I go to mass, I release myself to a mystery that I can't figure out, I can't understand, but he does. Okay. And as an evangelical, when I really was questioning this, I got in my car and I rode down and because I had been part of leading Scott Hahn to Christ in high school, okay, at a Laurelville weekend, and here he was now kind of the Catholic guru and so I got in my car and went down there. I said, Scott, you owe me, man. I got to talk. It was 11 o'clock at night. I woke him up because I had to see the bishop that night for dinner, and I had to figure out how to get into this. Doug, he was so unbelievable. I said, I finally got, where do you get off, man, with this? He says, you taught me everything I ever knew about the real presence.
Wow.
I said, what the frick are you talking about? And I felt the tears coming into my eyes, because I knew I didn't know where we were going in the conversation, but I was kind of lit up. And he said, were you the speaker at Laurelville in 1978? I said, yes, I was. Did you tell me about Jesus? Yes, I did. Did you tell me he died on the cross? Yes, I did. Did you tell me he rose from the dead? Yes, I did. Did you tell me I could have a relationship with him? Yes, I did. Did you tell me that I could go outside and I could pray a prayer and ask him to come into my life and his real presence would come in? I said, yes, I did. I did, and he did. Now, can you explain that to me? Can you explain that to me?
No.
No. And that's when I folded right there, And so I think with evangelicals and Catholics, we get all twisted up in our language. We mean different things and we hear different things. But when you really get down to it, in most cases, we mean the same thing.
Yeah. And you've been doing wonderful work uniting the body of Christ in Pittsburgh. It's been beautiful to see Catholics and evangelicals come together around the same table. And I just love what God's doing here. So thank you for your leadership on that. And thank you for sharing candidly. One thing that came to mind when you were just saying, you've had the privilege of leading many, many people to Christ. I would dare argue you're an evangelist, but any advice to those listening on evangelism? Because, I think we're called to it. I don't think a lot of us either know how to do it or, where to start. Any advice on how we can be better witnesses and lead others to Christ?
I think the best way to do it, which is what I do now, I don't do much evangelizing, but I will ask anybody anywhere at an airport or anything else or at a breakfast table, is there anything I can pray for you about? There's nobody ever that said no.
Wow.
And that's all that's the lead. Can I do it right here? No, don't worry about it, man. Like I'll do it. No, you're going to get prayed for. Okay. Well, that's a Ziploc bag. I mean, that's unzips the lock. And so that's the closest thing I get. Or if I were with you, I would say to you, hey, Doug, I just want you to know, man, every time I look at you, I see Jesus in you, man. Is Jesus in you? Because I think I see him. Those are the things that I think we can, they're basically acts of love because they trigger the soul. They trigger the soul, not the head.
I don't know if we'll have time to jump in the lightning round. So much I want to ask. I'll leave this really open-ended. Is there anything else you want to challenge leaders with or share with leaders before we start to wrap up our time?
Well, you asked me, again, we don't have time to really get into it, but, you asked me what books that were important in my life. And
Yeah.
let me just suggest, I'm going to give you the names of a couple, but
Sure.
the thing that you can take away from this with Reid is the fact that I'm far more interested in what stimulates your soul than what stimulates your mind or your activity. Okay, because that'll follow if your soul's on fire, And so my recommendation is only read things that fire up your soul. Okay. Not your mind, not your head, those are all things that are important, but they're for another day. If you've got a better theology of this eschatology than I do, who gives a rip, right? I just, tell me about what your soul, man. What's firing you up? What's getting you up in the morning? And so the books that I've read that get me up in the morning, and I read all the time, I'm just going to list three. One is Henry Drummond, The Greatest Thing in the World. Two is Dorothy Sayers, The Greatest Drama Ever Staged. And the third one, interestingly enough, is a book called The Birth of the Chaotic Age by D. Hock. Okay. And those books are things that challenge the essence of my kingdom understanding and my calling.
Wow.
Okay. They're the kindling that just absolutely keeps birthing new energy and new thought.
Thank you for sharing that. And we'll include links to all of those in the show notes. I guess if I had to handpick a few other lightning round questions, I would love to hear you just share. What is your biggest leadership pet peeve?
My biggest leadership what?
Pet peeve. What drives you crazy?
Peeve.
Yeah.
Well, I think that people who are people who think they're leaders and are not. They're of the most pathetic people in the world. They've been given a platform, but they don't know anything about leadership. And because anybody that's following a truly godly leader is going to basically have a testimony.
That's good. I don't know if you've had a bucket list in your life. I know you've done a lot of cool things, had a lot of great experiences. What's something that you think everybody should do at some point in their life before they die?
I guess it would be if I don't know if there'll be a Holy Land after what's going on there now, but there's nothing quite as energizing to the soul is to actually walk where Jesus walked and been on the journey with his in using his footsteps. And so if a bucket list, I'm just so happy that I got a chance to do that and experience that. Otherwise, I think that I have a favorite spot out in Colorado. It's up on a mountain, and in Vail, and I've been out there for 34 years in a row.
Wow.
And I have a mountain that I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I drive up there, and when I started, it had this little aspen shoot, and now I see this huge aspen tree. So I've been there that many times, that many years.
Wow.
And it's my all of us have something like this, but it's my place where I really hear God. And I would say that everyone, I don't forget the question you asked, but it's what was the bucket list. Uh, for for me, everybody should have, you know, a place like that they go.
Yeah, and I guess I would just ask, 85, is there anything you still want to experience on this side of heaven that you haven't experienced yet before you go?
Well, like any father, I have great desires for my children and my grandchildren,
Hmm.
and they're unbelievable people, but they're kind of tripping along in life spiritually, like a lot of people are today, confused and not liking what they see, and formal religion has left them cold and dreary. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd love to, if I were given the opportunity, I'd love to see them hit the finish line and in full stride. I've got an unbelievable wife, Doug, and that's another thing that I've been given. Even with all of the trauma we've been through as a couple, but the Lord has turned that around in ways that right now, she's a nurse. She takes care of me in ways that I cannot even imagine. She's been through with me what only an angel would endure, and so I'm convinced that that little girl that stepped into Wilkinsburg High School in 1961 and greeted me as the new young life leader, and with whom I fell in love instantly, was sent by God right to me. So that's been a great blessing in my life.
Amen. Yeah, thank God for that testimony and that you guys are doing well. Last question that I have for you is, you've done a lot in your life. You've made a huge impact for the kingdom. When you leave this earth and people think about Reid Carpenter, what do you want them to think about? What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's really simple. Whatever they know of me, did they feel loved by me?
Anything else you want to? Oh, go ahead.
I mean, that's the privilege of age. Every time I make a move, I got a list of people every day I call.
Wow.
And say, how you doing? I just wanted you to know I was praying for you this morning. I love you. And thanks for what you've done to please Jesus, because you certainly blessed me. Can't do much more than that. If I mean it, if I actually have prayed for them.
Oh, Reid, so grateful for your 85 years of faithfulness and just serving God in the kingdom. Thank you for the impact you've made on me. Thank you for being a cheerleader in my life and continuing to encourage me to go after what God puts in my heart. And I'm just so blessed. And on behalf of everyone who will listen to this, I know they'll be impacted deeply. Just thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Doug. Stay the course. Get old well.
I'll do my best. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Reid. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/397. And as always, leader, I want to challenge you that if you want to 10x your growth next year, then you need to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind Group. Mastermind groups are simply groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together on a consistent basis for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, to hold each other accountable, and to do life together. For me personally, mastermind groups have been the greatest source of growth in my life over the last 8 years, which is why I believe every leader should be in one. So if you're interested in learning more about launching or joining a group, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds or email me at dougsmith@l3leadership.org. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and I will quote the legendary John Wooden, who said this. He said, "A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life." And that is what it's all about. Well, leader, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Know that my wife, Laura, and I love you. We believe in you, and I say it every episode, but don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership.